It's time to talk about some health headlines, and joining us is our diet nutrition expert, Dr. Beth Kitchen. And a lot of people, after last week's segment, they also sent you some questions because you gave your address out, your website out. So we're trying to address some of those this morning, right?
Right. The first one is about erythritol and or erythritol. I always say that wrong. I always put an extra R in there. And it's a sweetener. It's called a sugar alcohol. And there were some headlines about it increasing the risk of cardiac events like stroke and heart attack. And somebody wrote in and said, hey, is this true? And the study that was based on was an observational study. And so we can't say cause and effect. Can we convincingly say that erythritol causes heart disease or causes strokes? Not really, not from this study design, but it is intriguing. Now, there was another smaller study that the researchers did with just 8 people, and they had them take a high amount of erythritol, and it did show that it increased the clotting in their blood, which is dangerous for having a stroke. And so, my advice to viewers is, for right now, I would say stay away from the erythritol just until we get more and better data. Now, the second part of this viewer's question was about stevia, which is a natural sweetener you may have heard about. And the viewer said, well, does that also increase the risk of, say, heart disease and strokes and clots? Well, the problem is that in some stevia products like Truvia, erythritol is also in that. So what you want to look for is stevia that does not have the erythritol added to it and is a pure stevia product, not a raw. The FDA has only approved regular stevia for use, not the raw versions, not the leaf versions, not some of the natural versions that you might see in health food stores. So really be careful what you look for. Look for stevia or stevia-side on the label.
Okay, and this next question addresses something I love to eat. I love tomatoes.
Yeah, exactly. So our segment last week was talking about how there's a doctor who says tomatoes are bad for you because of the lectin, and we sort of were able to dismiss that. But then another viewer wrote in and said, hey, what about tomatoes and arthritis? Because she was seeing things out on the internet about tomatoes and arthritis, and that's because of something called solanine that's in tomatoes and then also in other of these nightshade vegetables. That green stuff that develops on potatoes, that's solanine. If your potatoes are turning green, you shouldn't eat them. If they have a little green spot, you can cut that out. But once they start to turn green, that's that solanine, which is a inflammatory kind of poison if it gets too high in your foods. Now, in tomatoes, it's very low. Now, with arthritis, Mike, it's so hard to find good research on what foods may increase inflammation in arthritis. So what we recommend people do, the National Arthritis Foundation recommends that if there's a food that's giving you problems, what you should do is eliminate that food for 2 weeks and just do one food at a time so you know which one is potentially causing problems. So eliminate that food for 2 weeks, then add it back to a meal after that time period. And if it starts to feel like you're having problems from it, that may be a food you want to eliminate. This is a real toughie because there's not a lot of good research out there. Now, I've got 2 articles in this segment that are posted that I'm going to put in my blog. I'm going to do that so that viewers will have it after the segment. And so if you want to go to my blog, you'll see this transcript plus some links to some good articles that elaborate more on all of this.
Diet nutrition expert, Dr. Beth Kitchen, thank you so much.
And thanks to the viewers for those great questions.
Absolutely.